Welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast, the photo imaging industry's leading news source. Here's your host, Gary Peugeot.
The Dead Pixel Society podcast is brought to you by MediaClip, Photo Finale, and Advertech Printing. Hello again and welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. I'm your host, Gary Peugeot, and today we're joined by Jason Boyce, author and founder and CEO of Avenue 7 Media. Jason is an Amazon seller expert, and today we're going to be talking about challenges facing retailers in the fourth quarter. Hi, Jason. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Gary?
Doing great. So, as we talked about prior to the call, the photo industry is a big fourth quarter business. This is where people make most of their revenue and profits is in the fourth quarter. What is the outlook for people who are selling on Amazon in the fourth quarter who may have a reseller shop or something like that?
Well, I tell you, last year, an industry expert called Scott Wingo coined the term Shipageddon because of the increased demand on e-commerce was going to create a lot of problems. And it really did. I mean, Amazon performed better than everyone, but I don't know about you, but I received a gift from my kids in February through the USPS system. And, what we're headed towards right now is Shipageddon Part 2, which may even be nastier. I think last year at this time, I'm in LA, outside of LA. And if you look at the San Pedro port, there were about 25 ships anchored off the shore. At last count, there were 70 this year. And, the backup is starting, if you can get the raw materials, you can get the parts, it's starting very early in the supply chain, is going all the way to the final mile delivery. I will say this, though, Amazon is in an incredibly strong position to take advantage of Shipageddon Part 2 because they have leased their own ships, they have their own containers, they have their own warehouse fulfillment centers, and they now have more delivery drivers and trucks than USPS and FedEx combined. And so they're in a really good place. So if you are an Amazon seller and if you have inventory that you can get into FBA centers or you can fulfill by merchant, then you're in a really strong position, I think, going into the holiday. If you're none of those things, grab your ankles. It's going to be a rough holiday season.
You mentioned before about the different types of products that are in shortage right now. And we're really seeing it across all levels of the supply chain, whether it's raw materials or finished product, everything that needed, paper and chips.
Yeah, it's a disaster. I mean, especially for your camera folks, right? You need paper. There's a worldwide pulp shortage and you can't get the paper producers can't get raw materials to produce paper, even if they can, and they can get enough workers to do the production in their warehouses. Then you got to get a container. If you can find an ocean container, then you got to get it on a ship. And then once you get it on a ship, if you're lucky enough to get it on a ship, it's going to anchor at port for weeks. And then you get it unloaded and then you got to get it delivered to your warehouse and or, fulfillment center. And then once it's in the fulfillment center, there's no guarantee that a truck will be able to show up on time and deliver on time. I've never seen anything like it. I was wrong when I predicted last year that by this time this year, everything would be resolved. We're actually exponentially worse. And, and the camera folks, the chip shortage has to be affecting them as well. Right, Gary? I mean, that all the same things apply: paper, chips, plastic, you name it. Never seen anything quite like it. It's a disaster right now.
So how is this? What happened? I mean, why is this so much worse? Didn't people not learn a lesson as we were coming out of COVID, or is it just the labor shortage, or what's the big culprit this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think all roads point to COVID in one way or another being the source of the problem. There's a lot of pent up demand that happened from suppliers trying to get stuff from ocean. Our massive dependence on Asia's supply chain is proving problematic now. I don't know how to do this, but we've got to find a way to bring some of this manufacturing to North America, whether that's Mexico, US, or Canada. I don't care. We've got to do something about this. By the way, I'm not the person to solve that problem. It's a big one, but I think that dependency is there. There's been a big increase in e-commerce demand as well. Stores, even brick and mortar stores who had half empty shelves through COVID or were suffering through COVID because they couldn't open their doors. It's just this backlog of product, pent up demand from consumers et al. Right? This is a very long list of how we got here. I don't know that anyone I don't know that you can really point blame at anyone. I'm looking at Amazon, for example. There's plenty of things I blame Amazon about, but supply chain, I mean, they've added 30 plus 1 million square foot warehouses. They've added massive amounts of capacity that is akin to a war effort, like a shipbuilding in World War II. You have to go back to that time to see a company or an industry. And we're just talking about Amazon to do that kind of a buildup in terms of personnel and staff. And then sort of the last thing that's been lingering is this worker shortage. And I'm still scratching my head. Gary, I don't know why this is here. I don't get it. I know that depending on which side of the political aisle you sit on, you maybe because there's too many unemployment checks, or maybe COVID caused people to reevaluate their lives. I think wages are going up, which is good for those workers, and maybe that will entice many more to come back. But never seen anything quite. It's a giant cluster bang. I never seen anything quite like it.
Yeah, that's one of the things. I mean, you're in California, I'm in Michigan, and I routinely see driving around, either in fast food places or even machine shops. I'm kind of in the Rust Belt here. And, machine shops are saying, starting wages, $18, $19 an hour, will train, right? So if you're unskilled, you can get skilled pretty quick, plus a signing bonus. And it's amazing because it's in all levels. It's retail, it's production, it's manufacturing. And again, I don't know what the mystery to that is, but hopefully that'll be resolved soon.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, by the way. And I think that, by the way, that's good for businesses, that if more workers are making more money, certainly their cost structure is going to go up, but you need customers and you need people that are above the poverty line to be able to buy your product. And so I think this is good. I think this is a good thing. Look, CEO wages have gone up 300% in the last, 5 to 6 years. Why hasn't the lower end workers' wages gone up as well? And they need to. I think this is sort of, hopefully it'll all work itself out on the wage and worker side by this time next year. But it's definitely fascinating to watch.
Yeah, and what's interesting is it's unlikely, once things start stabilizing, and it's unlikely those wages are going to go back down, right? I mean,
I don't think they can.
Yeah,
exactly. Absolutely. I don't think they can. And on that lower rung of wages and hourly rates, it's long overdue. I mean, I remember in high school working at a speaker factory in Central California, and I was making $4.25 an hour. And that was like in the late 80s. It was a long time ago. Right. But that job today, where I was sweeping the floor at a factory, making speakers, Vandersteen audio, that would be like $22 an hour for the floor sweeper if it had kept up with inflation, right? We're just way behind, and it's long overdue. So I think over time, those increased wages will help solve the worker problem. Hopefully, I don't know.
What is the advice you would give somebody who, again, is relying on the fourth quarter, and they need to stock the shelves with something, right?
Yeah.
What can people do now in terms of sourcing product that they can do?
Start planning for next year if you haven't already. That's the first thing. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's too late. It's too late if you don't have inbound product right now. Even at Amazon, they're asking to have inventory in a fulfillment by Amazon, an FBA center, to have it ready to sell for the Cyber 5 day. They're asking you to have your inventory received into an Amazon warehouse by November 4th. And so I'm not sure when we're going to air, but we're recording here on October 5th. You got a month to get your stuff in. I have seen shipments going into FBA take more than a month to get received in after it's left your warehouse. And so if you don't have inventory in FBA, looking at a fulfillment by merchant out of your own warehouse is a good option. And you should start planning for next year. If you do have a limited amount of inventory and you're concerned about out of stocks, I'm not trying to say profiteer here, but if you're talking about e-commerce and you need your inventory to stay in stock so you can maintain your ranking, especially on Amazon, then you should consider, if Amazon will let you, increasing your retail prices to stay in stock longer so that you don't lose all that ranking that you've built up. But if you were smart enough to get inventory landed in June or July or August, then you're going to be fine, and you're going to probably run out of stock because everyone else is going to run out of stock before you. So you should also consider a pricing strategy that keeps you in stock throughout the holiday season, raising prices so that, incrementally, and not to profiteer here, to price gouge anybody. And that's what I'm trying to say, but just sort of taking some of those profits. Cause I know If you landed an ocean container, which used to cost $4,500 to land a year and a half ago, you're probably paying 20 grand or 15 grand or 30 grand to land it now. So by all means, make sure you're covering your costs and you're profitable, because the law of supply and demand is going to work in your favor if you've got stock.
If you're a retailer, your costs have probably gone up because you've had to pay more to get people to come into work and stock the shelves and whatnot. So, those costs are going to have to be passed on.
Yeah, we're seeing that in the inflation rates, right? The well above 2% inflation rates. I think some of that is temporary and it'll iron itself out.
Sure.
But there's some potential monetary policy reasons for why inflation is there. But all you have to do is look at hard goods sold, soft goods sold, and see the cost increases that these brands and sellers have been, taking it in the shorts for the last 12 months to know that's why prices are going up, because you're not in business to lose money on every sale. You have to make money. So the prices are going to have to go up in the near term for sure.
Are there any alternative sources other than Amazon for sourcing some products like hard goods? I'm thinking in particular, everyone talks about Amazon because Amazon is obviously the 800-pound gorilla, but it seems to me like the reliance on that is a little dangerous at this point, that maybe the message there is that needs to diversify a little bit.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And there's a lot to say on this topic. If you look at online market share, gross merchandise value, retail value of goods sold online in the United States, depending on which analyst you talk to, Amazon has 40 to 60% of the online retail goods sold market share. Second place is Walmart, which is a really big company, right? The largest global retailer in the world. Guess how much market share Walmart has online? It's 7%.
Right.
And so, all you have to know, and I'm an Amazon shopper too, guilty. The buying public who wants to buy something online start and finish most of the time on Amazon. And that's the case. And so I believe they're a monopoly. I think they have monopoly power. I think they've mistreated sellers who they wouldn't be here without, and brands who they wouldn't be Amazon without the third-party seller. They just wouldn't.
Sure.
I think the third-party seller drives more profit dollars to their bottom line than even AWS does. There's some argument on that, but they don't share those numbers. So,
right.
And so I think Amazon has mistreated them, and they're continuing to mistreat them. And so the legislators are starting to take action, right? So there's 14 laws that are working themselves through Congress to try to limit the power of Amazon has, so that it'll open the door to more competition, more innovation in the space. And so good retail brands can sell on 10 Amazons instead of one, where Amazon plays as the judge, juror, and executioner to so many listings, right? With an AI bot that's like a 6-year-old, right? It's just frustrating. And so I totally agree with you, Gary. There's absolutely time for diversification in online sales channels. And I think, unfortunately, Amazon's so powerful, it has to come from legislators. We just hope they don't muck it up and make it worse than it is. Right?
Well, they can't seem to be getting much done now as it is. So you mentioned the third-party seller thing, which I think is interesting, because we had a case here in the industry, and I don't know if you can speak to this. We had a case where it was a very high-profile case where there was a certain camera bag that was very popular. A company called Peak Design designed it.
Peter Daring. Can I tell you, Gary? I'm a co-contributor on the podcast Day 2 from GeekWire.
Okay.
Our very first podcast interview, Peter Daring. So check it out, Day 2 podcast. And
they got knocked off anyway copied by Amazon.
If you go back and you listen to that, it's fascinating to hear Peter Daring's perspective, because he is a high class individual.
Sure.
And here he was. Not only that, innovative, creative, amazing small business owner who's creating really great stuff with tremendous value. All of that creation costs money. It costs time. It costs treasure. It costs creativity, right? And so he became a best-selling camera bag at a premium retail price, because you know what? It's a premium product.
That much better.
It lasts. It's way better, right? And what did Amazon do? And you can hear my rage when I'm asking questions. I'm trying in the podcast, Gary, I'm trying to get Peter to take the bait and start yelling at Amazon like I was doing, because I was so frustrated by this. Because I've had it happen to me back when I was a seller, and I know it happens daily to sellers. But he was such a class act. But Amazon copied everything, even the shape of their logo tag, which is IP protected.
Right.
And they made a inferior product that looked identical, and then gutted the retail price. It was more than a 30%. I think it was almost half off, or like 30% of the retail price. It was insane.
And then they can also game, of course, the search results. When people search for Peak Design, they can put theirs right next to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, look, Peter is brilliant and will survive. And what did he do? He went out and created this amazing YouTube video that's got 10 million hits on it, where he made fun of them in a professional kind of way. They had these googly eye. If you haven't seen it, check it out. And there's a link on the podcast. But yeah, this is unconscionable, in my opinion, that Amazon, who owes so much, in my opinion, to the third-party seller, Amazon wouldn't be what it is today without without third-party sellers like Peter and your audience, Gary. They provided depth of SKUs, 500 million SKUs listed. Amazon retail has 15 million, which is a lot, but the rest come from third-party sellers. Innovation, grit, hard work, 24/7, 365 to have Amazon success, as Amazon sellers know. And then final, the capital. Amazon couldn't be as big as it is without the inventory. Amazon third-party sellers own title to that inventory that's in FBA centers or their own warehouse until it sells. And so Amazon, this is crazy to say about a almost $2 trillion valuation company, Amazon would not be able to bring the capital to bear to buy all the product that third-party sellers hold title to.
Right.
And so to have them come in and do what they did is infuriating to me. It's, as you can tell, my blood's boiling a little bit right now, just remembering that episode, Gary. It's messed up.
Do you have any opinion on this at all? How do you really feel?
Yeah. I mean, it's maddening. And, you know, Andy Jassy should go to work every day and thank God for third-party sellers. They wouldn't be where they are today without them.
So do you think there will be a trend? Because I mean, if you're a camera store, I'd say, for example, a camera store, some of them have shops on Amazon, some of them don't. The big ones, of course, don't. Your B&H's, your Adorama's, whatever, they have their own infrastructure, obviously. And then, of course, you have the brands themselves, and you can go to Canon and buy a camera if you wish, right? So what do you recommend for people who maybe have that shop that's not an Amazon shop, and so now you're kind of competing against Amazon. You're not B&H, and you're also competing against the brand themselves sometimes. Now, the brands are usually smart enough to not get super price competitive. It's more of a convenience thing, right? People want, all the crap that comes with a certain camera.
In my book, The Amazon Jungle, I talk about being a private label, having your own brand name of product is the way to go on Amazon. That being said, there are multi-billion-dollar sellers on Amazon that are only resellers.
Right.
Okay. So they're selling other people's stuff. But here's the thing. Here's the way to be successful as a reseller. And I did this with Spalding. I was a drop shipper when I first started, and then we started carrying our own inventory, and then we worked, and then Amazon came in and kneecapped us and started selling the same stuff at like 30% less than we could buy it at, right? And so we went back to Spalding and said, Spalding, we've been your number one e-commerce dealer for 5 years. You've been inviting us to the NBA All-Star game and putting us up in the Ritz as a result, right? I mean, we did a lot of business with them. And you just letting Amazon come in here and kneecap us. We think that if you take product X and tweak it to make it product Y, and you take product Y and you tweak it to make it, product W, and change happy to glad and give us our own unique UPC code so that we can sell your brand name, but we're the only seller of it with an exclusive relationship. Yeah. We think it will do great. And it did. And we convinced them to give us a handful of products. And they were only ours. And we had this exclusive relationship with the brand because we were doing big volume with them. And it was great. Amazon nor anybody else could attach to the listing. So that's one strategy. The other strategy that a lot of big resellers, thinking Farm Packs, thinking Spreetel, they have their own logistics networks. And so they have warehouse capacity in multiple locations across the country. They have seller fulfilled prime, and it's a logistics game. And they're even, sometimes buying product all the way from the factory for a brand. So they're picking it up and paying FOB. So anywhere throughout that supply chain where you can go in with the brand and lower your costs potentially, work with the brand to get exclusives is a protective layer with your business. And so that's one or two strategies there, Gary, that I'd recommend.
The good thing is that's already happening in our space, right? I mean, we have, a buying group here in the US that does the warehousing. They do this, they do a lot of those things. They have exclusive products and things like that. So it's good to hear that's where that should be going.
Yeah, that's a viable strategy. Definitely viable still.
You said right now you got to start buying for next year. That seems kind of crazy, but it seems like every year it gets earlier and earlier. At what point? I mean, honestly, it's just crazy. Do you think at some point though you're kind of losing touch with the customer because you're buying stuff a year out? It just seems kind of like you're making educated guesses based on zero consumer input into a fourth quarter that is a year away.
Yeah, well, Gary, look, that's the life of the CFO, right? You have to plan. You have to plan a year out, and you have to put your best guess, your best estimate based on past performance and expectations of future performance into financial model so that you can identify what you're going to need next year. And look, we were in the home rec space and we sold most of our sales back when I was a seller. I'm no longer a seller, just an agency owner. But back when I was a seller, we would close out by December 15th. We were working on our pro forma for the following holiday season.
Right.
And what would we do with those numbers? We'd make our best estimate. We would put together quarterly projections. We'd send them to the factory and say, hey, look, here's our purchase order. We'd like the right before we finalize this purchase order to change our mind on the quantities based on what's happening on the ground. But we want you to have capacity to create this much product for us.
Right.
And we didn't always buy exactly what we predicted. Sometimes we bought less. Sometimes we begged them to give us more than we projected. But what that did, and by the way, you need to do this in capacity with your freight carriers as well. You need to let FedEx know. You need to let UPS know. You need to let your USPS know, hey, this is the capacity I'm expecting in Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. Can you give it to me?
Right.
There's another supply chain mess is FedEx last year in peak season said, I'm sorry, Nike, I can't come pick up your stuff. I don't have the capacity.
Right.
Everyone went, well, FedEx is doing that to Nike. Well, Nike didn't do a good enough job in their projections.
Right.
They didn't give it to them early enough so that FedEx guaranteed that capacity for them. And so you got to dust off that crystal ball now more than ever and guesstimate what you're going to do each quarter next year. Now put those POs and get them in there now and say, look, I will sign this PO when we're closer to the production date, but I want to give you these numbers now so you can start thinking about the rest of your year, and it helps the factory plan.
Well, in Nike's case, they probably like shortages because it raises the retail price. Creates an artificial.
Well, yeah, look, because if Amazon, you run out of stock on Amazon, you lose all that ranking you gained. So, I'm a pretty heavy e-commerce guy, so I never like running out of stock because you lose that Google rank, that organic search rank. But certainly, I could understand that from a store perspective. But isn't it better to sell more?
Yeah. No, I agree. You always want to have the product for the consumer. What they want when they want it, because there's just so many choices these days. And it sounds to me like what you're talking about works better in markets though where there's not a lot of technology change or rapid product evolution, right? So for non-tech, you mentioned Spalding. I assume that was like basketballs or tennis rackets or something like that. So I'm not sure if there's a lot of radical change that goes year to year. So I guess it depends on which market you're in. That is a concern.
No, look, it's a really great point. I was just having a discussion with an apparel maker recently that's in fast fashion. Mm-hmm. And they were asking us how we can help them with their Amazon business. I said, look, if you come up with a new fashion every 60 days and we have to start a brand new Amazon listing every 60 days, you're never going to succeed on Amazon. Right. It's never going to happen. Why is that? Because with Amazon, you're selling to the algorithm, and Amazon likes listings that last forever, 3, 4, 5 years. And so once that listing gets ranked, even if you have small iterations or upgrades to your product, you should keep that same listing. And so what we talk to when we talk to the soft lines folks in the clothing business is, what are your evergreen products? What are the jeans that you're going to sell on Amazon that are going to be the same kind of jeans 2-3 years from now, or maybe 2 years from now, where we can build up ranking on that listing so we can get as maximum amount of sales. And so even in a space where you do have, look, when you're talking purchase orders, there's always still the old standby, right? Even in the camera space, there's still products that are going to sell the same this year as they do next year.
Right.
And so at a minimum,
stuff like that, yeah.
Right. At a minimum, you want to make sure that you're looking all the way down the road in terms of buying for those kinds of items. But if it's in one of those spaces where, the computer chip is different this year than it is next year, and you're going to upgrade, you have to ask yourself, well, let's order that new stuff too. Let's put in orders for the new stuff that they're working on. Yeah. And let's update the listing with the new upgraded model rather than having a brand new listing. So it's just part of the e-commerce game.
Yeah, because in the camera world, we have cameras that are updated, but there's not big radical revolutionary changes. There's things happen, and but generally speaking, it's at a higher end, higher margin product where I think people wait for it. And there's still a ton of used product and everything out there. So I think you're a camera retailer, you can make a lot of adaptations without relying on the latest and greatest, to be honest. Unlike the old days. I mean, there was a time where spring new cameras would be announced and people would go crazy, but I don't think that's the case anymore.
I think that the death of brick and mortar retail, especially sort of these regional stores that provide a lot of high end service, is overrated. I don't think those retailers are going to die at all. I do think that they need to adapt. Right. I think they do need to have a hybrid model where they're allowing products online and in their stores. And then I think those stores have to become more experiential. And I know you could probably rattle off a handful where they're giving classes, they're giving, updates, they're doing all of the things to build a community around their store, rather than just being another retail store that they can buy a product from and walk out. Yeah. Right. That's where a retail store can really shine and grow. And so, I mean, I love the camera space. I'm going to brag a little bit here, Gary. I won a blue ribbon for best photo in the Oregon State Fair back in the Stone Age. And so I'm a camera buff myself. Nice. And Gary, I'm going to tell you a nostalgic story here. A friend of mine, he's the only guy I know that was selling on Amazon before I was. I'm going to tell you a little camera story. Jeff Berman was a big camera retailer and one of the first sellers of camera equipment on Amazon. And this is in the early days when Jeff Bezos invited him into the room to say, Panasonic and Sony won't sell to me. Canon won't sell to me. We're thinking about creating this little marketplace where you can come on and sell your products third party. You carry title to the inventory. And that way we can get these high-end brands on Amazon. How great is that story, right? Jeff Berman sat in the room with Jeff Bezos where he was literally inventing this third-party marketplace that's now a monopoly. and poor little Jeff Bezos, who just went into outer space with the money he made off of third-party sellers and retailers, he couldn't sell Canon on Amazon, right? How great is that story?
So what happened to your friend?
Now he's a consultant. He's a C-suite level consultant. And, I was just introduced to him last year and we've developed a fast friendship, and he goes into big brands and helps them manage this jungle that's Amazon, right?
Speaking of the jungle, tell me a little bit about your book.
Oh, thanks for asking. So yeah, it's funny. Rick Cesare, my co-author, is a really talented marketer, a marketing legend, honestly. And to give you an idea, he did the TV campaigns for the George Foreman Grill, OxyClean. He hired George Foreman to be on those TV commercials, and Billy Mays for the OxyClean. He also did GoPro cameras. That was his campaign. He helped make GoPro cameras. Look at all these camera stories we're weaving in here, Gary. And Rick became friends. He was a keynote speaker at an Amazon show I'm now on the board of, which is a great show if you want to learn about Amazon selling. And I went up to him afterwards and went, "Oh my God, this is amazing. You blew my mind with your marketing tactics." And it turned out that he lived 15 minutes away from me. I was living in Seattle at the time in Sammamish, and he was in Issaquah. So we sparked up this friendship, and we would have coffee every Friday morning and talk. He would talk about the TV days and the marketing days, and I would talk about Amazon. And he says to me, "You should write a book." And I said, "Rick, it took me 8 years to get a 4-year college degree. I can't write a book." And he goes, no, you know more about Amazon than anyone I've ever met. Let's do this together. And so I'll layer on my branding stuff, and which I had been using and to massive success on Amazon. And so we wrote this book, and we started off writing a book. It wanted to be sort of this get rich quick scheme. Like, hey, make $1 million selling on Amazon. Right. So I started writing that, and I was getting pissed. Every paragraph I wrote about, I was having these memories about Amazon screwed me over at one step or another. I went back to the Issaquah Coffee House with Rick after I had written a chapter and said, "Rick, I can't freaking write that book. I can't write because we need to be honest about how difficult Amazon is. It's a friggin' jungle. And so that's what we did. We wrote this book. We talked about our story. We talked about the importance of sharing your story as a brand, as a seller.
Right.
Talked a little bit about the early days when Amazon just wanted to be as big as eBay someday, right? Back in the Jeff Berman days.
Yeah.
And then we lay out in detail a successful strategy for how to succeed on Amazon. And we do it with stories because we think stories are more powerful and that helps stick in your mind. And I ended up loving the writing process and loved the book and loved writing it and thinking about writing another one now.
And it didn't take you 8 years to do it.
No, amazing. Year, knocked it out in a year. It was like, all that great college education, double the normal path, must have helped somehow.
So can you get that book on Amazon is the question.
Yeah. The standard joke is that Amazon hasn't taken it down yet. So you can still get it on Amazon. You can get it on Barnes and Noble and any of your, some of your local bookstores, Books A Million and some of the others. But yeah, it's available on Amazon for sure.
And if people wanted to find out more about you and your company, where would they go?
You can go to avenues7media.com is our website. There's a form there to fill out if you want help with your Amazon business. I will say we focus on private label brands. So if you've got a nascent private label brand or one that you'd like help with on Amazon, we can help you. So there, I'm also on Twitter at JASBOYCE and LinkedIn. My profile is Jason, the R as in Robert Boyce. And I'm very active on LinkedIn and Twitter. And I mentioned the Day 2 podcast, which is a labor of love. And yeah, you can reach out any of those ways.
Well, great, Jason. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise. And I'll look forward to connecting with you on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Gary. Keep up the great work in your community. It's just awesome. And I'm envious. Keep up the good work.
Thank you for listening to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. Read more great stories and sign up for the newsletter at www.thedeadpixelssociety.com.